First of all, I want to thank all of you because you made it possible for me to make some very special donations um, this past week. Uh, I have talked, I've shared with you different organizations that are worthy of support at this time in Israel's history, and taking advantage of the funds that I have. Well, it's not all of them, only some of them, but the funds that I have through the Adult Center for Jewish Learning. I have made contributions to the following organizations, and since it's your generosity that made it possible for me to do that, I thought I would share with you the organizations. Um, 4 donations went to 4 especially critical Israeli organizations: American Friends of Mogen David Adom, Friends of the Israeli Defense Forces, Friends of United Hatzalah of Israel, and Zakah. This provides both the medical help that will be necessary in the coming days and support for the Israeli forces that are going to be called up very quickly. I sent $633 to each one of those. 613, I'm sorry, 613. That's significant. $613 to each one of those organizations. And then in addition to that, I sent $280 to 4 other organizations: Israel Aid, One Family Israel, Stand With Us, and the Los Angeles Jewish Federation Israel Help Program. So thanks to your generosity, we have been able to send about $3,500 to various charities in support of Israel, in addition to what we're doing ourselves and our own contributions through the Jewish Center, through the Center for Jewish Learning. We have made a contribution as well. Tonight, we are going to enter our 4th of 7 sessions on the text, on the course we call Kedoshim Tihiyu, You Shall Be Holy, studies in the book of Leviticus. And since we're now at the halfway point as we are in our course, I thought I would review briefly where we have come from. In previous years, we have studied together the book of Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers. That was a series of books which describe in a narrative fashion the history of the world from creation all the way to the Jewish peoples arriving at the borders of the land of Canaan, the land of Israel. So it covered the period from the beginning of the story of creation to the story before the Jewish people entered the land of Egypt. We have studied together the book of Exodus, which tells the story about how the Jewish people went into Egypt. The 70 members of the family of Jacob, of Israel, went into Egypt. They became enslaved there. They were slaves for 210 years until God heard the people's cries and sent Moses with the message and with the mission of telling Pharaoh to release the Jewish people because they belonged to God. We went through the book of Exodus. We came to Mount Sinai. We built the tabernacle. That was the end of the book of Exodus. And then last year we studied the book of Numbers, which picks up actually just about a short time right after the book of Exodus ends. We picked up the book of Numbers, and we followed the Jewish people during their 39 plus years of wandering in the wilderness. And we ended the book of Numbers with the Jewish people just opposite the land of Canaan, opposite the land that God had promised them. And there at that place, Moses is told that he is going to die. And before he dies, Moses asks that he be given time to address the people one last time. And the book of Deuteronomy, which we are not covering this year, is the final address of Moses to the Jewish people. The book number 3 that we have not discussed yet is the book of Leviticus. And I told you the book of Leviticus is really the heart of the Torah. If the first, the second, and the fourth book are the prelude and the epilogue to the story of the Jewish people from creation till the time they came into the land of Canaan, the book of Leviticus actually represents the Jewish people's mandate. its mission statement, what it was supposed to do. And it comes from the very first part of one of the chapters in the book of Leviticus. It says, "Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor," the Lord spoke to Moses and said, "Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh Adonai Elohechem." You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. And so in studying the book of Kedoshim, we were going to explore the question, number one, of what is holiness? What does it mean to be holy? And what is the mission of the Jewish people? What is this purpose for which God calls the Jewish people to be a mamlechet kohanim, a kingdom of priests, and an am kadosh, a holy people? So we have had 3 sessions so far. In our first session, I asked you the question, what was holiness? And without quizzing you or whatnot, or going back through it, I'm sure you all know, I said that in this world, in the universe, in our experience, there is only one thing that is intrinsically holy, and that is God. God is the ultimate of holiness in the world. And I described for you that how, in order to create the world, God had to contract himself, had to constrict himself, and create a space so he could create the world and he could create humanity. And our task as human beings is to take our freedom and our opportunity and our ability to bring God back into the world. So how does a Jew bring God back into the world? Well, he or she does it by creating holiness in the world, bringing God back into the world. And so far we've talked about 2 different kinds of holiness. We've talked about holiness of time, and we've talked about holiness of place. Okay, so that's all we've talked about so far. Holiness in time. I asked you, what is holiness in time? And I said, Kedushat Hazman, the holiness of time, represents the way in which we encounter or experience God in time, and how through our experience of God in time, we bring him back into the world. God began by creating the world. He sanctified the 7th day. He sanctified Shabbat, and he called it holy. And we in Jewish life are supposed to take the pattern of Shabbat, the pattern of holiness, and we are supposed to reflect it in our life. Every time we have a holy moment, it is a moment when we can encounter God, when we can bring him into the world, we can experience him, and we can remember our contact with him historically. Now, God creates the Sabbath, but the Jewish people, as a counterpart to the Sabbath, created the Jewish holidays. So you'll remember in our second lecture, I said to you that corresponding to the 6 days of holiness, the 6 days and 7th day of Shabbat, that Judaism has 6 different holidays, which during the course of the year enable us to maintain contact with God. And that is through the holidays of Passover, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeret. So in this way, just as God created 6 days by withdrawing himself from the world, we bring God back into the world by celebrating as Jews these 6 holidays, which bring us into contact with God. Last week, I asked you what, yes, question, Randy.
No, I don't have
Okay.
questions.
Last week, I asked you we talked about holy places, and I said to you, what is a holy place? And I defined a holy place as any place where humanity encounters and meets with God, okay? And we talked about times in the Bible where that occurred. And I told you there are many places in the Bible that were mentioned where God spoke either to our ancestors, to the Jewish people, or to the people as a whole. And we reviewed some of them. We talked about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. There were a number of different places where God spoke to each of the patriarchs. And while God spoke to them, those places were holy because it was an encounter, a meeting between God and his people. But they didn't remain holy. They were holy for the time that God and human beings were interacting. Then I told you in the book of Exodus, the prime moment of holiness was when Moses was tending his father-in-law's sheep at Mount Mount Horeb, Mount Horeb, and he turns aside to see a bush that is burning, that is not consumed. The mountain is also known as Sinai, and Moses approaches this bush, and from the midst of the bush, God calls out to him and says, Moses, the place where you are standing is holy, remove your shoes. And there, God and Moses have an encounter and they meet, and God tells Moses a couple of things, but most importantly, what his mission is to be. You will go into Egypt, you will go to Pharaoh, for I have heard the cry of the Jewish people because of the oppression they suffer. You'll go to Egypt and you will say to Pharaoh, let my people go, because these people, the people of Israel, does not belong to Pharaoh. This people is my people. I take them for myself. Moses goes in, and so Moses goes in. He sees God at Mount Sinai. He sees God in Egypt, where he not sees God, but he experiences God. He meets God in Egypt in several places. As he leaves Egypt, he meets God and confronts God again at the place of the Red Sea, then at Mount Sinai. And then finally, he creates a permanent place where he can converse with God and meet with God. And that place was called the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So what is a holy place? A holy place simply is any place where we can come into contact with God to hear his message, to listen to his command to us, his demand of us, and where we can respond. And I told you that no place remains holy forever, that they may be holy for a while, but when the Jewish people leave the place, like Mount Sinai or whatever, place returns to just a regular place. Places aren't inherently holy. But there is one exception to that. I said there is one place that does remain holy forever, even though God may not be there, or we don't perceive God as there presently, and that is Jerusalem. I told you if there is one place in the world that the Jewish people actually consider to be Kodesh, an Ir Kodesh, a holy city, a holy encounter with God, that was Jerusalem. And it was a holy place because there the Jewish people dedicated the temple. That was a place where after they finished with the Mishkan, the temporary tabernacle, they created a permanent place in which to experience and to encounter God. And the Jerusalem temple is perhaps the only place in the world that is in Jewish life that is considered, has a degree of sanctity to it, even though God's temple does not exist on the temple and does not exist on the mountain at this time. And indeed, the place where the temple once stood lies not in destruction, but is hosting another structure called the Dome of the Rock. All right. Having said all that, I come to the third area of holiness that we are going to discuss together. I told you 6. So this is area number 3. Now, time can be holy. Time can be holy when we separate time apart from the regular world and we bring God into our lives and we meet with God. A place can be holy, and not just the places I mentioned in the Bible, but some of you last week said you feel God's presence when you're in a synagogue. When you walk into a Bet Knesset, you feel like it's a home of God. Or when you walk into a church, or when you walk into a Beit Midrash, a house of study. Some of you said last week that you feel God's presence when you sit at your Shabbat table and you welcome in Shabbat on a Friday evening or on a holiday evening when you celebrate with your family and friends. For other people, there are other moments that would be other places that could be considered holy. In many of our lives, a place that we consider not a place, a moment we consider holy, and is the time when a man and a woman marry under the chuppah. Of course, a chuppah is just a covering, a canopy over where the bride and the groom stand. After the wedding, the chuppah is just a piece of cloth, but while the wedding is taking place, it is a place of holiness, a place where we feel God's presence. But there is another place where human beings encounter God, and here, this is different than any other kind of experience we have. I can best explain this by asking you a question. I'm going to stop talking. What makes human beings different from every other living creature that exists on Earth? Okay, if you want to answer that question, raise your hand. I'll call upon you, and you can. Okay, Lori, go ahead. Let's start.
Because we have a soul.
We have a soul. All right. So Lori has correctly identified the answer. The greatest distinction we have, the only distinction we have, God imparted some of himself. God imparted some of God's self into each human being. That which we call the soul, that which is not material, that which is not made up of material components, that thing that makes us unique in the world among all other creatures, is that we have a soul. A spark of divinity is implanted within each and every one of us. Very good, Lori. Now, if you weren't thinking about a soul, can someone tell me in another way, Lori's answer is correct, but in another way in which human beings differ from every other creature on the earth?
Besides the soul.
Okay. Any other way you can think of that human beings are different? Okay, go ahead, Harvey.
Yes,
Unmute yourself.
Harvey, you need to.
I'm just unmute. There you go. Gary.
We have free will, the ability to reason and choose.
We have ability to, go ahead, Harvey, one more time.
We have free will.
Free will. All right. Yes, free will. All right. Again, I hadn't even thought about that, but true. Other creatures in the world do what they do by the virtue of the way they are made. Because of the soul which God gave us, he has been able to give us a choice. He says to us, you may choose to either follow the way I want you to travel, to do what I want you to do, or not to do it. So Harvey is correct. So we have a soul, we have free will. Neil, go ahead.
Is it how we process death?
How we process what? One more time?
How we process death?
No, interestingly enough, I used to think that we're the only creature that is conscious of mortality. And then someone said, Rabbi, you're not correct. They pointed out that elephants, when they reach a certain stage in their life and they know they're going to die, they wander off somewhere. There are a lot of creatures that experience or understand their mortality, or that they are not going to continue on. So the fact that we understand, the fact that we understand we're mortal at this point in our life, that's unique. But there are other creatures in the world, other living things that have a sense of their mortality as well. That's not the unique aspect about man. There is the one other thing. Go ahead, Jerry.
I think it's Ecclesiastes that says we have eternity in our heart.
Yes, the eternity that Jerry mentions in our hearts, that's the soul. Remember, the body is material, so like every material thing, the body has a beginning and the body has an end. That's the nature of material things. They have a beginning and an end. Jerry is saying, but the part of us that's the soul, which Lori identified at the beginning, that part of us has immortality. That although the body may come to an end, though we may experience, as we have been talking about, we may realize we are mortal and we're going to die. The unique thing about individuals is we also have an immortal part of us, which is represented by the soul. But in this life, nothing, I don't mean anything esoteric. In this life, how can you tell the difference between animals and human beings? Anybody? Go ahead, Lori.
We can create and invent.
Animals can create and invent. I remember a class that I took where they can use tools too, by the way. Someone,
Right, they can.
yeah, you know, a primate, an ape, when it wants to get at termites that it can't reach, it takes a twig, strips it of the leaves, puts it down, and gets the termites and eats it. Other animals can use tools too. We're not the only animal that can use tools or can be creative. And by the way, in case you want to answer this, we are not the only animal that is intelligent. There are other animals that we know are intelligent, but there is one difference between human intelligence and every other kind of intelligence. Anybody want to tell me what that is? Debbie, is that a hand? No, that's not. Okay. All right. Well, what we're doing right now, go ahead, Jerry.
Question.
Is it that for some reason we humans have a sense of spirituality? Or
That's also part of our spirit. Good. No, we can talk. We can communicate. Now, I don't mean communicate. Animals can communicate. Bees can lead other bees to spots. Ants have a system of communication. There are other animals that communicate, but only human beings are possessed of this esoteric knowledge of speech. We are the only creatures in the world that can do this. Articulate speech is a human virtue, okay? As a matter of fact, there are some biologists, physiologists who suggest that the human brain is what it is because of the human capacity for speech, that our brains are larger than other creatures, proportional to our size, because of the fact that we communicate. Communication, the ability to communicate through words, through language, symbolically, is what makes us unique, okay? What's the difference between you and your pet dog or cat? You can talk, your pet dog or cat can't. I'm not saying you can't communicate with them. Some of you know from the way your animal behaves that they're hungry or they're this or they're that. Some of you have even interpreted their cries so that you can tell from the sound of a dog or a cat whether they're hungry or hurt or whatever. But in terms of actually communicating ideas, in terms of conveying information, human beings have the unique ability to utilize language, to utilize words to communicate. Now, I'm going to give you a chance to challenge me. Does anybody think that there is any other creature in the world besides human beings, any other living creature in the world that can communicate?
I'm questioning.
Go ahead, Neil.
Like animals, like one dog can teach another dog to do something.
Yes.
So there is communication within the species itself, not cross species, but so they do have the ability to communicate.
Yeah, let me change the word communicate, Neil, because I'm told that even to communicate ideas in symbolic fashion through words. I guess what I'm not saying is communicate. The difference between human beings and every other creature is we can speak. Okay? I can speak to you. I can convey ideas for you, not only concrete ideas, not only what I want, but abstract concepts too. You realize that it is only human beings that have the ability to be able to share with each other ideas, even complex ideas, even ideas that I don't understand because I'm not a physicist or a mathematician. But not only the ability to conceive these ideas, which is remarkable, but the ability to communicate these ideas to other people. When I sit in a lesson, a class, a lecture, whatever you have it, whatever you call it, and someone is communicating to me ideas and explaining something to me to the point where I can follow what they're saying, even if I don't know the technical vocabulary, I can follow what they're saying and they can make me understand a very complex idea in simple terms. That is a unique human ability. This is the ability to communicate through language. We can communicate ideas. Therefore, speech is a dimension of holiness as well. Only human beings have this holy aspect of speech. Animals cannot deal with the concept of kedushat halashon, the holiness of the tongue, of language, of speech, but human beings can. Now, the reason that we are unique in this respect is because we are like, as we started saying at the beginning, when Lori mentioned soul, because we share with God an attribute. What is the first thing you know about God from the book of Genesis? The first thing you know about God. In the beginning, when God was creating the heaven and the earth was unformed and void, darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. And what's the next verse? And God said, let there be light. Okay? God's first interaction with the world, that he is void, is empty. God has restricted himself, has condensed himself. He has now a whole stage on which to create a world. And his very first act of creation, the void, the emptiness, the chaos, his first word is Vayomer Elohim, and God said, Yehi or, let there be light. And then the verse says, Vayehi or, and there was light. Imagine this. God creates, and I don't want to make too much of this, but God creates through an act of speech. Some of you are going to say, well, wait a second, Rabbi, are you saying that God actually speaks? Does he have a voice? Speech in this sense means God wills it. And God said, let there be light is just a fancy way of, a simple way of saying, and God willed that there be light in the universe. God willed that there be a division between the upper and the middle waters. God said to the waters that cover the earth, separate and create the dry land and the sea. In other words, speaking is a vehicle of creation. Speaking is holy because God, in creating the world, speaks the world into existence. Okay? And there are some religions which take this idea very seriously. In Christianity, for example, in the beginning was the Word, the Logos. Okay? Where do we first see God manifest? Even before anything came into being, even before light, God said. God communicates through his will, and we call that language. Now, man is unique. Human beings are unique. We are the only creature that, like God, can create through words, through ideas, okay? Imagine that. You get all of your pets together. Between them, they'll never be able to create a computer, or they'll never be able to hold a class. They can't even talk to each other. But we human beings, because the soul of God is within us, we share with God the divinity of speech. We have the ability to utilize speech in creative ways in order to bring order and purpose to the world. So tonight, I want to speak to you about the concept of Kedushat HaLashon, the holiness of language, okay? And I'm going to do this in a number of ways. Let me start by saying this. After God created the world, which he did, it says, through saying, and God said, when God first blesses man, what does the Torah say? Does anybody remember? It says, and God spoke to man and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, okay? God's relationship with man is through words. In other words, how does God relate to us? Through words. Now, you're going to say to me, well, that's impossible, Rabbi. God doesn't really have any words, and he's infinite, and we're finite. And I don't know. I can't explain it to you. But somehow God communicates to human beings through words, okay? What is the Torah? The Torah is the word of God to the Jewish people, right? How did God communicate Torah to the Jewish people? Well, God appeared to Moses, and he said to Moses, I'm going to speak, and you're going to teach the Jewish people. How did Moses experience God? Was it an actual speech? Did God hear God actually speaking? I don't know. But what Moses heard, the communications, the laws, the traditions that Moses heard from God, he communicated it to the Jewish people. Moses was the intermediary. He was the vehicle through which God revealed his word to God's people, to the people of Israel. And so you see, from a very early point on, from the time that God blessed us, God has constantly entered the world through dialogue. Now, those of you who studied with me Genesis, I could ask you, I won't, how many of the patriarchs that God speak to? And you'll say, oh, he spoke to Abraham, that's right. And he spoke to Isaac, that's correct. And he spoke to Jacob, that's correct. Oh, and he also spoke to Joseph. Well, that's correct. Now, how did God do it? What method did he use? Visions, dreams, whatever. But the point is, the message that God wanted to convey, however he conveyed it, he conveys it, and we have it through speech. God says to Abraham, Lech lecha, go forth from your land, from your birthplace, from your kindred, from your country, and go to the land that I will show you. And throughout Abraham's encounter over his life with God, God communicates his will, and Abraham, the faithful servant, hearkens to God and does what God requests of him. And more than that, Abraham begins to teach the way of God to others. So it was with Isaac and Jacob. Moses, when he stands on the top of the mountain, Mount Sinai, where he was tending his father's flock of sheep, he sees a bush, and the bush speaks to him. How does a bush speak? I don't know. A bush doesn't speak. But Moses hears the bush commanding him, Moses, the ground upon which you are standing is holy. I am the Lord, the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the God of the people Israel. I have seen their affliction. And now, Moses, I am telling you, this is your mission. You are to return to Egypt, from which you fled. You are to go to Egypt. You are to confront Pharaoh, the sovereign of Egypt, and you are to directly confront Pharaoh and say to him, in my name, let my people go that they may worship me. Moses hears God speaking from the bush. And notice in Judaism, it's always the sense of hearing that's important. We have no visual image of God. When God ever appears to Jews, it's seems to always be through the ear. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. God doesn't appear to us through actual concrete visions. Maybe he does through night visions, dreams, whatever. God communicates through the word. And so throughout the time that Moses is leading the Jewish people through the wilderness, he is teaching them God's will. Where does Moses get the text? How does Moses know what God wants the Jewish people to do, how he wants them to live? God tells Moses. However he does it, he tells him. How do the people know this? Because Moses, in words, turns to the people and says, essentially, thus God has said to me, God has commanded me to speak to you and say. So words are the medium by which Moses, during the 40 years, teaches the Jewish people God's will. And finally, at the end of his life, what does Moses do? Because he's not going to be there anymore. What does Moses do to guarantee that the people don't forget God's words? He takes those oral words, those oral transmission, and he writes it down. He puts it in, he creates the first Torah scroll, all right? And he puts it in the ark, and he says, in time to come, when I am not here to be God's spokesman, to be God's messenger, to be his prophet to you, you will always know what God's will is, because that which I have taught you is set down, God's holy word is set down in the Torah. So imagine the power of the word. In Jewish life, our entire history as a people, from Abraham through Moses and continuing on, has been communicated through the word. Our study of Torah, the place of Torah in our life, is merely the place of how God's word was taken from being an oral communication at one point in history, and how it was eventually set down in writing and became the universal word of God for all times. That's pretty powerful. It shows you that words are influential. If the Jewish people live up to the mandate that God has given them, they're going to have the task of having to live out those words, experience those words. So let us now talk about the holiness of language. If God is holy and God creates through language, we human beings, if we want to be holy, we also have to create through language, all right? So now I'm giving you the third kedusha. What is holiness of language? Holiness of language is using the gift we have as human beings, the gift of intelligence, of speech, of communication, whatever you want to call it. It's the ability to communicate God's word to ourselves, to our children, to our next generation, and to our fellow human beings. That is the purpose for which we were told to be holy. God says, I want you to be holy, not only in the sense of meeting me at certain religious times. I want you to be holy not only in meeting me and encountering me in certain places in the world, see me through the universe, see me behind the universe, but I also want you to use the gift that I have given you, the gift of speech. I want you to use that gift of speech to sanctify, to make holy the world. Okay. So some of you now may say, well, all right, how do you use speech to sanctify the world? What does that mean? Well, it's easier for me to explain it from the other way. Those of you who've studied Bible with me, can you give me examples from your study of the Bible so far as to how speech can be used to hurt, to desanctify, to take God out of the world? How can speech be used in a way that doesn't bring God into the world, it takes God away from the world? Someone give me a sin which the Torah mentions that has to do with speech. What is one of the mitzvot connected with speech? Go ahead, Harvey.
Well, how about to use God's name in vain?
All right.
I think Carol's hand was.
Oh, Carol, I'll get you in just a second. Commandment number 3, they're on Mount Sinai. Commandment number C, you shall not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. So God specifically, among the big 10, he says, you shall not take God's name in vain. What does that mean to you, Harvey?
Well, it means in part to me that you shouldn't curse and use God's name as a justification.
Okay. And some people, and that is one of its meanings, that you shouldn't use God's name to curse or as an epithet, either to say a curse word or to even say, inflict upon person, may God do this to you, may God do such and such to you, may God cause your head to be in the ground and your legs to be up in the air like a turnip, whatever. In other words, you don't invoke God's name to hurt people, to divide people, to curse people. So you don't use God's name in vain. Also, there's another sense, Harvey. The actual commandment, you shall not take my name in vain, refers to something else. I know when he knows this, but I'll tell you. It refers to taking a false vow, taking a false oath. When you testify in the name of God, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. When you take God's name and you swear to something and it is not true, Harvey, you are taking God's name in vain, or for false purposes, or for bad purposes, okay? So it's not just cursing using the name of God. It's not just invoking upon people who share our life with God's curse. May God curse you forever and ever, may you. It is also, you are not allowed to take to swear in God's name to a falsehood. Not to, in other words, to say in God's name, such and such is true when it's not true. Lori, go ahead, I'm sorry. Oh, I meant Carol. Carol, did you want to add to
This
this?
is Carol.
Yeah, Carol.
No?
No? Okay. Lori, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say what you just said. Like when you lie intentionally, then you're not doing God's will or whatever.
Very good.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an oath. Lori is adding another sin that you may not have thought about. When you lie, in a way, you are using the gift of speech not to bring things together necessarily, but to create a disunity in the world. If I do something, if I cause hurt to someone or I take advantage of someone or whatnot, and then I try and dissemble by saying I didn't do that, that is taking the gift of speech, Lori, and profaning it. It's making it the opposite of holy. I'm debasing it. Now, are there times when I am allowed to lie? Sure. If, I don't know, if Erwin is chasing Lori and Lori hides out in the closet in my bedroom and Erwin runs into the house and says, did you see where Lori went? I'm not compelled to say, yeah, I saw her. She's in the closet in the bedroom, knowing that Erwin intends to do Lori some bodily harm. That's not the kind of lie it means. And it doesn't mean when someone comes to you wearing a beautiful article of clothing or something that they bought, or it shows you something that they purchased, they say, what do you think about this? Are you required, if you don't like it, to say that's the most hideous thing I've ever seen in my life? No, that's not, no. When a person describes the person that they met as the most beautiful person, the bride describes the groom, or the groom describes the bride as beautiful, that's not a lie, because in the eyes of the person who loves someone else, that person is beautiful. You see, lying is not being diplomatic, although you have to be careful with that, but lying is being considerate of another person's feelings. Sometimes you don't tell the complete truth, not to hurt anybody, and not even to protect yourself. You do it so as not to hurt somebody. And if any of you ask me how you read Torah, you did this, you opened a prayer, and you said to me, how did I do? I'm going to always encourage you. I'm going to always make you feel good about yourself, because the truth is that by feeling good about yourself, you will continue to improve. Neil, go ahead.
If you don't mind, I want to share a story. Somehow I ended up in a Bible study with the president of Azusa Pacific.
Okay.
And there was a passage out of the New Testament that everybody in the group was going to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
And it had something to discuss about him, and it had to do with truth or love, and which one is more or better, or so the discussion was comparative to truth or love. And so they were all going around and they were saying, well, truth is, and no, love is, and everything. He got to me and I go, truth is what you do and love is why you do it.
Okay. And you can speak the truth because you love someone, Neil, but also because you love someone. Here is the contradiction. You can sometimes not speak the truth to someone because of love, right? Love is the motivation. You recognize in your fellow human being another creature of God. You realize an aspect of God in the people around you. You want to honor that. You want to nurture that. You want to build on that. And therefore, out of love, you are going to treat that person in a way that increases their own sense of self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-assuredness. If it means sometimes that you are not completely candid, either in their choice of tie or their choice of spouse, sometimes you don't have to be compelled to say, oh, by the way, your spouse is the ugliest person I've ever seen in my life. You don't do that. And you don't do it because truth is not the most important thing. And I would say it's not even love, but respect for humanity, respect for the divine aspect of humanity is the most important thing. If that means that sometimes you have to dissemble, I won't say lie, dissemble, and sometimes you have to dissemble. Sometimes you have to couch your truth in certain words. Go ahead, Lori.
I guess what you're saying is that what we say is dependent on content, perspective, judgment, and all those pragmatic things that we have to use to really function in relationships.
Very good.
Mhm.
Yes. And it makes us like psychologists. Have any of you ever gone to a psychologist? They never tell you what's wrong with you, right? They just ask you a bunch of questions, and they hope that through the questions that they ask you, you come to an awareness yourself of the issues that are troubling you. Well, that's the way we are supposed to be. Our job in this universe is not to judge other human beings. We are not placed here to judge them themselves or their actions or their decisions or their choices in material objects. Our purpose in speaking to other people is to reaffirm their sense of integrity as a human being. And how do we do that? Through speech. When I sit down with someone who's trying real hard and they're getting real frustrated, and they say, I'm never going to get this, I'm never going to understand this. What do? I start over again and I try and explain it in a different way. And I tell them, if you've convinced yourself you're not going to understand it, you won't understand it. You've already convinced yourself you can't. But if you keep listening and keep your ears open and keep your mind open, there is a way for you to understand it. In other words, you try and encourage people. And how do you encourage people? Through giving of your words and through giving of your time. All right. So go ahead, Harvey.
Are you indirectly saying that a white lie is okay? In other words, if your intent is not to be mean or harm the person, that might be okay. There's certain degrees of lies. Some might be okay.
Lies bother me because there's a lie is usually told, Harvey, this is my experience, to protect the person who tells it, not to help the person he tells it to. If I want to sell you something and I sell you this object and you say, how much did it actually cost you? And I lie to you, I'm not lying to you for your benefit. I'm lying probably because I don't want you to know that I've marked it up and I'm trying to sell it to you for more, right? Is that right? No, it's not right. In the area of business, if we have business relations together, you and I, Harvey, are business people and we enter into business together. And I know certain things that if you knew them, it would affect your decision. I'm obligated to tell you that. I am obligated not to take advantage of the ignorance you may have about a certain subject and use it to my advantage. If I take advantage of your ignorance and use it to my advantage, Harvey, then that is not allowed. That is a lie. That is plain and simple a lie. A lie is always what I do to protect myself. When I tell someone something in order to encourage them and keep their confidence up, I am not telling a lie. I am doing something else. I don't know. I'm couching it. I'm encouraging them, however you want to say it. If I want you to do well, I'm not going to tell you, no, that's not it, you failed. The worst professors I ever had were the professors who had a class in front of them and they said, all right, who knows the answer to this? And the professor points to one student, the student gives the answer and says, and the professor says, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. You dismiss someone as wrong, chances are you'll never get them to raise their hand ever again. When a person answers a question, I tell people there are no dumb questions, there are only dumb answers. But I don't even mean that. But what I mean is to be not know is okay. To be ignorant, meaning to not have the information that one wants to have, is not bad. We are supposed to, in our life, gather information. If every time you ask a question, I'm always going to validate the question, Harvey. And most of the time, they're good questions. They're very thoughtful questions. But I'm never going to say, oh, no, you've missed the point completely. You're on the wrong track. That doesn't help you. It doesn't help me. And so in answer to the question, are you allowed to dissemble or allowed to fudge the truth? The rabbi said, yeah, you are. And they point to a story in the Bible, give you a Bible story. When 3 strangers come to Abraham to tell him, among other things, that he's going to be a father the following year. And Abraham says, how can I be a father? I'm 99 years old. How can a guy who's 100 years old have a child? And the angel says, nevertheless, I'm telling you, at this time next year, you will bear a son with your wife, Sarah. Now, Sarah was listening to this whole conversation through the tent, and the Torah says Sarah laughed. How shall I have a son with my husband, him being so old? When God repeats to Abraham Sarah's words, he says, Sarah said, how can I have a son with my husband, Sarah, being so old? God shades the truth in order to preserve peace. Okay? What is the value? Peace. Connection, ties between human beings. Any kind of knowledge that disrupts, that destroys, that tears people apart is not holy, is the opposite of holy. Give you an example, okay? Lots of examples. Every time the Jewish people complain, remember, and they complain a lot of times during the 40 years. Why did Moses bring us out here? Why did he bring us out here? He brought us out here so we should all die with him, okay? Complaints is an example of unhelpful speech. It may not be a lie, but it's not doesn't represent good speech. When Moses confronts Aaron, he says, "Why did you build that golden calf for the people?" And Aaron comes up with a story. Well, they asked me to do it, and I did it for this reason. Aaron is dissembling. He's not telling the truth. But Moses understands why Aaron is embarrassed. When the spies are sent out to spy out the land of Israel, they come back, and Moses says to them in front of all the people, "Did you see the land?" And they say, "Yes, we went into the land." And Moses said, "Was it a good land?" And they said, "Yes, just as God said to you, described it to you, it is a good land, and the mountains and trees and waters and valleys and such." However, what do they do? They say, "However, we can't take this land because the people are too strong and the cities are too fortified, and this land will eat its people." They spread slander about the land. They spoke ill about the land. Instead of bringing the people together for what God wanted them to do, which was to go into the land of Israel and take it, the spies' words caused dissension. Remember, right after that episode, Korach and a group of rebels rise up against Moses. And they say, has God made Moses the only leader? We're also leaders. God said we're all holy. Why should Moses be the one to lead us? Why shouldn't we share in leadership? They were spreading words of dissension. Words can be blessings and they can bring people together, but words can also be vehicles that will tear people apart, okay? When you speak words of rebellion and revolt, or you speak words of shame, when you shame someone, here, I'll show you how you hurt someone. The Torah says there is a person who is a proselyte, who has become part of the Jewish people, you are forbidden to recall before them the fact that they were once children of idolaters. You are not allowed to bring that up. Why? Because your words are designed to hurt them. By saying that, by them choosing to be part of the Jewish people, and you saying, yeah, but you weren't born Jewish, you became Jewish, you are using words to divide, to separate, okay? That is not the function of language, okay? There are so many examples in the Torah, and I made lists of them, and that's not important for you all now. But to defame your fellow human being, to gossip, to spread lashon hara, to bring defamation against people, all of these are sins that we commit with the mouth. Let's take a look at the sin of gossip for a moment, because this is a great one, okay? Of all the sins that you can commit with your mouth, yes, Erwin, yes, Harvey, if you curse God, that's not a good thing. I don't involve you to curse God. And if you should knock yourself in the thumb with a hammer, find some other way of expressing your anger, but don't try not to use God's name to do it. If you're angry with a person, do not call upon a curse upon them invoking God's name. That's not healthy. If, Harvey, you are frustrated with someone and you point out how badly they have done, you make them feel inadequate about themselves, you are using words to hurt people. If they make certain choices and you feel they're silly choices and you tell them, you're hurting them. So too, if you have an enemy who you do not care for, who you do not like, and you spread stories about him, whether they are true or not, you are guilty of using language to hurt other people. There are three kinds of sin. There's rachio, which we call gossip. There is something which we call lashon hara, the evil tongue. And there is what is called motzi shem ra, to bring forth an evil name. What's the difference between them? Okay, who wants to be my guinea pig here? Okay, Lori. Okay, so let's say I'm talking with Joseph about Lori. And not just idle gossip, I have no ill intention. And I tell Joseph something about Lori or something else that he didn't know, and it wasn't his business to know. But, I like Joseph and I'm running out of things to talk about. So I got to tell you what happened with Lori, okay? If I tell it, even if my intention was not to hurt Lori or to do it with an evil intent, and even if what I am telling Joseph is the truth, that is still considered gossip. You all understand? We do this all the time. And I'm not going to say that men do it any less than women do. We all do it. Go ahead, Lori.
But actually, whether it's good intent or bad intent, gossip in general is used to connect people. And we talk to people with gossip because we don't have anything else to talk about. So we talk about other people. And I think we've learned to do that, whether it's right or it's wrong. And I think for general purposes, it's not meant to be malicious. It's just
not meant to be
meant to be like a communication device. Not
Did everybody
like,
hear what Lori said? She is absolutely right. And that's why I said gossip does not have to be malicious. There are three kinds of people in the world. The people on the lowest rung are people who talk about other people. Higher on the rung are people who talk about issues or programs or events. On the highest level of people who talk about ideas. If the only way, Lori, that you can connect with someone is by talking about someone else, and that's really what gossip is about. Gossip usually is just a way for two people to connect with each other. Lori is correct, by talking about someone else. Did you hear what so-and-so did? You'll never believe what so-and-so did. Okay? And even if it's not particularly negative, even if it's a very human thing, you are establishing your relationship on the basis of talking about someone else. That, Lori, is called gossip. It doesn't matter whether it's intended for good, intended for not for good. It doesn't even matter that the words are all true. That is called gossip. And the Torah says about gossip, life and death are in the power of the tongue. You want to kill someone? The first thing you do is you start by gossiping. All right, so then you're talking about someone, but let's say what you're sharing is not just sharing it just to talk with someone, but you don't like a person and you have the intent of, letting that person's true character be known. Why don't people see this person as I do? I know I'm going to tell other people what this person is really like, and I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to base it on, but they think this person is such a tzaddik, such a saint, such a good person, so righteous. I'm going to tell them a little of the things this person does, and they're going to see this person has clay feet like everyone else, or they're going to see that this person is selfish. This person claims to be giving and generous and compassionate, but I'm going to show them through the stories that I tell that this person is a imposter, that they are not what they claim to be. So I tell you things, okay, and I tell you the truth, but my intention now in telling you the truth this time is to hurt the other person. That's the second kind, the worst kind of speech. That is called lashon hara. It means literally the evil tongue. That is speaking evil of someone else. And by the way, usually people speak lashon hara, is my experience, to make themselves feel better. If you don't feel good about yourself, the best way to feel good about yourself, don't take this as a prescription, is to start talking trash about someone else. If you can make someone else sound bad, you by comparison are much better. I may not be a saint, but you should hear what so-and-so did. Go ahead, Lori.
Sort of like what certain politicians do with social media. And it's so true. Like if you're feeling bad about yourself, you put other people down to make yourself feel better, which is like the worst.
That it was not the worst, but it's bad. You're right. You can say, I was telling the truth. All I was saying was something that actually happened to that other person. But I said, yeah, but why did you tell me that? Well, I thought you should know. Well, why would I know? Why would you give me that information? Well, the real answer is because you want that person's reputation to be hurt. You're telling me so I think less of that person. That is number two. But there is a third category that is worse than that. And this is something that politicians do as well. It's called motzi shem ra, defamation, telling things about another person that are absolutely not true in order to impugn or damage their character. This is direct character assassination. If I tell things about a person, not that they're true, but I tell them with the intent to hurt them, and I make up stories about them with the intent to hurt them, that I am on the lowest level of human behavior. I not only am speaking gossip, I'm not only speaking evil of the person I'm talking about, but I am creating lies deliberately to hurt that person. And it may not even be to hurt that person. You all saw this past week that a hospital was hit in Gaza. And before anybody knew anything, Hamas was already spreading the word that 500 people had been killed in this hospital and it had been caused by an Israeli missile. And the New York Times and other publications came to press right away, Reuters, BBC, and they said, Israel missile kills 500 in hospital. And they protect themselves by saying at the end, according to Palestinian sources, okay? This is lies. Israel urged these things, said, don't say anything. We have proof this was not us. The New York Times just came out today and said, oh, we made a mistake. Sorry. We should have checked our sources better. We shouldn't have taken the word of Hamas, who runs the hospitals and who disseminates it. We shouldn't have believed them. So unfortunately, in this modern age when media can be deadly, if you spread false reports, if you hear a report and you spread it without checking, and it is not true, you have not only told a lie, you have told a lie that cannot be repaired. Gazans and Arabs in the Arab world will never believe now that it was a rocket fired by Palestinian Islamic Jihad that caused the damage. It didn't even enter the hospital. It landed in front of the hospital and never touched anyone in the hospital and only killed people on the outside. There were 300 casualties. The New York Times says actually it turns out there were more in the area of 10 to 50, maybe. All right. The point is, once you've spread this kind of lashon hara, which you do either for political purposes or personal purposes, you do it to divide, you do it to hurt, and once you've spread it, you can never, ever take it back. When I was a kid, they used to tell us, sticks and stones can break my bones, but names can never hurt me. Stupidest statement I've ever heard. Truth is, the names can hurt you, and words can hurt you far more than any physical damage. If my wife got angry at me, she never would, and she socked me in the arm and said, don't do that. I'm going to get over that in about 30 seconds, maybe a little longer, depending on how hard she hits me. But if my wife says words because she knows my weakness isn't wanting to hurt me, I'm not going to get over that in 30 seconds. If people spread accusations against other people, if they destroy, kill their reputation, it is like murder. That's what the rabbis say. That when you destroy someone's reputation, it is like taking their life. Go ahead, Harvey.
Well, you can defame somebody, but you're telling the truth. In other words,
okay,
I can defame somebody, and if it's the truth, and they try to sue me, I'm going to win.
That's correct. Defaming someone, you can win a defamation suit by saying it was the truth. By the way, that is the way in which people who claim in defamation suits, so-and-so defamed me, they not only have to prove that so-and-so knew what they said was false, They have to prove that they knew it wasn't true. In other words, when you defame someone, Harvey, you are not telling the truth. When you defame someone, you are intending to hurt them. And you hurt them by defaming them, by means of making them appear bad, not telling the truth, making them appear bad. If you tell the truth, Harvey, that's called Lashon Hara. You're making a person look bad by telling the truth. But when you defame them, you are making them look bad by saying things about them or the people they belong to or the beliefs that they hold that are not true. And if you want to sue someone for defamation, Harvey, it's a hard bar to meet. You've got to not only prove that what you said was true, okay, you've also got to prove that you have to prove that it was true and that you didn't say it to hurt someone else. But if it's not true and you did it to hurt someone else, that's defamation. That's it. No good. Okay, you can't.
Right, but if you defame somebody and it's the truth,
yeah,
you're telling the truth. That's it. If you're telling a lie about somebody,
okay,
then when they sue you, you're going to pay damages. But if you're telling the truth, even
right.
though you want to hurt them,
Right.
it's still the truth.
I guess that's the difference between the word defamation in English, maybe, and the term motzi shem ra, which is the Hebrew term for it. In the term motzi shem ra, it not only has to be deliberately done to cause hurt to a person, but it has to be false. It has to be a lie. You have to have created a falsehood. I can say something about people, and it's true. I can say that, I don't know, Hamas deliberately puts its people in the way of Israeli troops to use them as human shields, or it uses the hostages as human shields. I don't intend to speak well of Hamas. I don't intend to speak well of them, but I believe what I'm saying is the truth. Okay, that is not defamation. But if I were to spread lies like they did, they committed this or that. In other words, if I said that Hamas, October 7th, killed babies, old people, young people, wantonly tortured them, raped them, mutilated them, cut off their heads, if Hamas didn't do that, Harvey, that would be defamation. That would be wrong. But Hamas did every one of those things in that attack. When the Palestinians say the Israelis are doing the same thing, how do you know that? Well, when they were trying to bomb Hamas, they hit a house next door that had innocent civilians. Israel's guilty. They're just like, well, no, it's not the same thing. Hamas went and it rounded up individuals that were innocent and deliberately slaughtered them and took pleasure and joy in slaughtering them. If Israel drops a bomb and there's collateral damage, that's not the same thing. It's the same thing that innocents die, but it's not the same kind of action. We've got to be very careful with our words. We have to understand that words have implications, okay? And one of the worst things you can do is speak Lashon Hara. How bad can Lashon Hara be? There is only one incident in the Torah where we hear of an incident of Lashon Hara. And who is speaking this Lashon Hara? Does anybody remember in the Bible the one case of Lashon Hara? Who's speaking it? Go ahead, Lori.
Was it Miriam?
Miriam and Aaron, two holy people, okay? Moses' sister and Moses' brother, remember? And it's after all of these calamities befall the Jewish people, and Miriam and Aaron are talking to each other, and they speak negatively about Moses on the idea is that it was because of the Cushite woman. But in other words, we're all holy. God spoke to us. Why should Moses lead? What was Miriam's punishment? Do you remember, Lori?
I think, didn't she suffer some disease?
Yes.
Yeah.
The disease we're going to read about a lot in the book of Leviticus, which is not the disease we think of. They are struck with something which we call wrongly, well, we would call it Hansen's disease today. They were struck with leprosy. But as you read about the disease, it has nothing at all to do with leprosy. Nothing at all. Okay? Leprosy can occur on a person's garments. They can occur on a person's furniture or items, utensils. It can even occur on the walls of a person's house. Lori, do you think leprosy can occur, what we call leprosy can afflict a house or a person's objects or a person's anything else?
I didn't think it could.
It cannot. And what's more,
It's like a human thing. It's not.
correct. And
Yeah.
what's the cure for leprosy? Who do you go to if you have a case of leprosy? Well, you go to a doctor and you treat it medically, right? In the Torah, leprosy is regarded as a moral disease. And who do you go to determine whether you have contracted this moral disease? You go to the Kohen, to the priest. And the priest looks at it, and the priest determines, based on certain signs, if this is in fact tzara'at. I'm not going to even say leprosy anymore. This is tzara'at. What is the cause of tzara'at? As we will see later on when we read this text, it is lashon hara. Not even defamation. When you speak lashon hara, even if the words weren't intended to be hurtful, even if they were intended merely to describe your attitude toward a person, that is the cause of leprosy. You know why leprosy is particularly important? When I see you face to face and I tell you what wonderful people you are, but behind your back, I'm telling my wife what scoundrels you really all are. I'm giving one appearance to you here, but I'm talking about you otherwise. I am two-faced, or my moral corruption is not showing for you. When I speak to you, and I'm two-faced, when I speak lashon hara, which is never spoken to a person directly, I'm pretending to be something that I'm not. What's the correction for that? I should be stricken on the outside so that my moral disease is reflected in my physical appearance. When I am disfigured by leprosy, when I become stricken by leprosy, the world can see the kind of person I truly am. No more lashon hara. What I've said behind your back, evil gossip, to hurt you, that is and not just gossip, it's actually lashon hara, with the intent to hurt you. Now it's revealed to me because you can see in my skin, on my face, these white blotches, my moral deficiency is exposed right in front of you. You can see me. And what is the punishment, by the way, if for a person who has tzara'at? Do you know what the punishment is if you have leprosy? What is it? You are banned from society. You are banned from the camp. You must leave the camp until you are healed. What does it say? If you speak language that is divisive of your community, that is harmful to the wholeness and integrity of your community, you are punished with a disease that shows that you are deformed, that your soul is diseased, and you must be put outside the camp because you are not fit to be in the community with others. All these things, and by the way, there's another area I haven't gotten into, I'll just mention to you, taking a vow. I told you on the high holidays, don't take vows unseriously. If you say, I swear to God, I promise to God that I'm going to do something, especially if you invoke God's name in the oath, taking an oath, I'm going to do such and such, or I vow not, I'm going to not drink alcohol, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. You swear in God's name and you don't fulfill it, you're guilty. Words are serious things. Words have consequences. You take an oath, you make a promise. You're not only responsible to the person you made a promise to, but if you made a promise before God and you don't fulfill it, you're responsible to God as well. And the Torah says in the book of Leviticus, or no, it says, I'm sorry, in the book of Deuteronomy, it says, if you don't take a vow, there's no problem. You're not punished for not taking a vow. But if you take a vow and then you fail to realize the vow you have taken, then you're held responsible for the consequences. Lori, go ahead.
But what if you take a vow and you think you can fulfill it, but then you can't?
All right. So that's why we forgive each other on Yom Kippur before we pray Kol Nidre. That's why you ask people for forgiveness. That's why you say to God, for all the vows that I made last year that I didn't fulfill, please don't hold me accountable. I really meant it. I was serious. I intended to fulfill it, but I was weak and I followed it. But if, Lori, you take a vow and you have no intention of filling it. In other words, it's not that you intended. In good faith, the truth is we human beings often take vows or make promises, and we don't have the strength to follow through. God recognizes that, and he's not going to hold you completely guilty for that. But if you take a vow or you promise someone to do something and you have no intention of doing it, I'll tell you what, we're going to get together next month. We'll see each other and I'll give it to you then. And you have no intention of ever speaking to that person. That's worse than telling a person that you dated, I'll call you. Okay. At least when you don't call, well, you call, you say you call you, you're lying. You're lying to the person. When you make a promise to a person and don't fulfill it, when you encourage a person to believe something is true and it's not true at all, you are using language in a destructive manner. Do you all see how language can be unholy? Okay, so what then is holy language? If I started out by saying holy, someone would have said, oh, saying prayers is holy. Well, saying prayers is very nice, but that's not the holiness of language. Saying a prayer is recognizing God and thanking God and saying in words, God, I recognize that I'm alive today. Thank you for giving me life today. God, you got me through this terrible time. I want to acknowledge you. I want to thank you for helping my loved one through an illness. That's just plain gratitude. That's it's not even a matter of words, it's just a matter of recognizing in words what God has done. Saying a prayer, acknowledging God is great or something, is words, but it's not words per se. It is a formula that you recite to express yourself to God. Carol, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All this discussion about language and lying and defamation and all the last half an hour of what we've been talking about, doesn't it really mean that we're holy because we have free will?
It does mean that, but when it comes to language, you express your free will by taking your other gift, the gift of speech, which God gave you, and using it in ways that bring God into the world by bringing humans closer. It is an act of free will. You're absolutely right. Okay, so, but how do you use your free will in speech? By using it in a way not to divide people, but to unite people. Okay, are you a divider or are you a uniter? In the groups that you're a part of, do you come in and do you try and help people resolve something, to work together with them to come to a conclusion? Or are you there to point out their failures, to point out why they're stupid because they don't see that their idea is no good? And in general, speak about them in such a way that it's going to bring disunity among your group. Give you an example. Jim Jordan decided to take the people that didn't support him on the first ballot and have his followers call them up and threaten their wives and families. Okay, you want to know how you can use language to destroy? You didn't support me. I'm going to have people call up and curse at you and tell you we're going to get you because you're so and so. Your husband didn't support, your spouse didn't support Jim Jordan. This is the way you use language destructively. Everything is a matter of free will, Carol. You're right. We have free will. But when we use the gift of speech, which is a divine gift, which is divine, when we use speech to hurt and to harm and to destroy, we are taking a divine gift and we are making it unholy, right?
Can you give an example of some other gift that we've gotten that we use in that causes
yeah, I'll give you just as an example. Possessions are a gift that we are given but can be used for bad purposes, right? If I am given certain possessions and I use those possessions in a positive or negative way to hurt other people, that's a bad use of a positive gift. If God gave me certain blessings and I use them to hurt other people, that's a illegitimate use of something that I am given.
and that also goes back to free will.
Everything goes back to free will.
Everything goes back to free will.
Everything is free will.
So that is why we as human beings are
Yes.
holy.
And free will, Carol, because a part of God, it dwells in you. God couldn't demand that you act in a certain way. He couldn't demand that you exercise your free will if a part of God wasn't implanted within you, in your soul. That part of God that is within you, that is your soul, that's the part that's answerable to the giver, okay? When God gave you a soul and he gave you the responsibility and told you you can use this soul that I've given you, you can make choices for good or for evil. The choice is yours. That's what it means to have a soul. That's what it means to have free will. And whether
are you saying also that it was the Jewish people that were are the holy people because we have this free will, but actually in reality everybody has free will?
I am saying not that the Jewish people are holy, because if I said the Jewish people were holy, I'd be committing the same mistake that Korach and his rebels said. Human beings have a capacity Carol, to be holy. This is what I'm telling you. Because you were made with free will, because of the soul that you have, because you can choose to follow God's word in this world, or because you can choose to bring God into the world, you can be holy. You can become holy. But just because you're Jewish doesn't make you holy. And doesn't mean that if you're not Jewish, you can't be holy. The whole idea is the Jewish people was merely meant by God to be a people to teach the other nations of the world that didn't have this Torah, this covenant. God says, I want you to teach what you've learned about holiness to the world. I want you, the Jewish people, to be to me like a holy people. I want you to bring other people to the realization of what they are to be. Do we do it? Unfortunately, we do not. Are there Jewish people who in many areas in their lives fail the test of holiness? Yeah. People who never experience God, either in time or space, or in their language or in their ethical or moral dealings. We're going to talk about morality. What about a person who claims to believe in God, Carol, but they stiff their renters and they don't fix things in the apartment, or they sell them things at inflated cost? That's unholy too. You can't say you're holy if you're behaving in ways that are not holy. If God says to us, you shall be holy, it means, as you said, Carol, we have the capacity of as human beings to be like God, not to be God, but to be like God. God is holy. We human beings, through our words, through our actions, through our deeds, through our celebrations, through our concern for one another, we can be holy. The trouble is, so many of us don't remember that, Carol. In life, we forget about that. It's easier to be crooked. It's easier to be shifty. It's easier to, not follow through on our values, to not be what we say we are.
One more question
Sure,
about
go
the
ahead.
leprosy thing. I don't remember now who it is, but was it Jesus or was it in the Jewish history where somebody goes to the lepers and in the caves and helps them where these poor lepers live? And it's never been thought of as something that was caused by these people themselves. This is a new concept that you're talking about today. That leprosy, this illness of leprosy, is self-inflicted.
That's exact. You mark yourself with the outer disfigurement by the inner disfigurement in your life. Yes, there are stories, miracle tales, if you will, about how certain people are cured of their physical leprosy through some kind of miraculous or divine act. But that's not the way leprosy works, at least not the leprosy that the Torah is speaking of. That leprosy is not a physical disease, as we will discover. It is a spiritual disease that manifests itself in physical symptoms. That's what we're going to discover. And it is always caused, Carol, by Lashon Hara, by the evil that we do with the tongue. I will tell you all, most of the sins I don't cheat people in business. I don't really deal with people in business too much. I'm pretty honest. When I hit myself with something, I don't curse because I found other ways to sublimate it. When I get angry at my wife, I sometimes say things that aren't nice, or that I do. But well, that's the point. Most of what I do in this world, including gossip, I'm guilty of it too. I'm not telling you I'm free of it. I am telling you I am implicated as well. And that is why so many of the sins that you confessed on the holiday of Yom Kippur are sins of the mouth, okay? For dishonoring parents and teachers, for lying, for dishonesty in business, for gossiping, for taking false vows, vows you never intended to keep, for making oaths that you didn't fulfill. These are all sins that I commit with the most dangerous organ in my body, my tongue, and my palate and everything else. Go ahead, Jerry.
Just if you had entertained a tangent, then how would you classify when Adam supposedly said, well, the woman you gave me?
Adam was doing what we do. When we get into trouble, what do? We try and blame someone else. When God said to Adam, remember that tree in the middle of the garden that I told you not to eat of, the knowledge of good and evil? Did you do that? What God asked? Didn't he know? Of course he knew. He wanted Adam to make a confession. Yes, God, I did it. I ate of the tree. I disobeyed your will. but he doesn't even accept his own responsibility. He says, I didn't eat of it because I wanted to. You see that woman you made me? In other words, he's blaming God. That woman I never asked for. You never asked me if I wanted. You made me the woman. She ate of it. She gave it to me, and she caused me to eat of it. This is what you call a lie, because it was designed not for good. It was designed to protect Adam from being punished. And then God turns to Eve and says, did you do this? And he said, well, I didn't do it. The serpent made me do it. God says, wait a second, you heard me, you heard the serpent, you decided to listen to the serpent over me. The woman has no choice, no chance to redeem herself. Yes, Jerry, that is a deception. That is a lie. It is a lie that's noticed. It's the same kind of a lie that you have. I used to watch Candid Camera, and with this, I'll close. And they used to have what Alan Funt, you remember Alan Funt on camera? And he used to have kids, and he used to have cameras trained on them. The person that was in with them would say, I got to go out for a second. Please don't eat this, or don't touch this, or don't do this or that. And the camera was on them all the time. And no sooner does Alan Funt, whoever goes out, what does the kid do? It does exactly what they're not supposed to do, just like Adam and Eve. All right. And then they come back, the person says, oh, by the way, when I was gone, did you? Oh, no, I didn't touch it. I didn't do it. That's the nature of what we are. Because we make mistakes and we're embarrassed and ashamed, we lie. Lying is a vehicle to either protect ourselves or to blame someone else and take the focus off of ourselves. Okay. Language, like time and place, can be holy. Okay, next time, which is, I think, 2 weeks from tonight, I think we have a week off, we're going to talk about holiness of what we eat. One of the things human beings do, like animals do, we breathe, we sleep, we procreate, we do all those things, but we also eat. In what way does the way you eat differ from the way an animal eats? Now, I have some friends who I couldn't say exactly how they differ. I don't mean kosher, not kosher. I mean, they just are discussing eaters. But, if you come to a meal, set yourself down without waiting for anybody to eat. You start to eat, you start eating food. You never acknowledge the hostess. You never thank them. You never say a prayer. You just eat and gobble it and eat it ravenously. Then when you're finished, you leave your table, you leave the plate on the table and you walk away. That's not how humans eat. Animals can eat that way. Animals can eat until they're satiated and walk away. But we human beings, not only what we eat, but how we eat can also be holy. So you say, well, how can eating be holy? Animals eat. Yes, but the way we eat as Jews can be holy. We can take the act of eating and turn it into a holy act by praising God, reciting a blessing before we eat, by reciting blessings after we eat, acknowledging God as a source, by talking with one another and sharing words of wisdom at the meal, by thanking our host, by even invoking blessings upon our host in the course of the meal. Eating can be a very civilized act. And I don't mean to tell you that we should go to 18th century or 19th century England and eat in the prop. I mean, eating itself can be not only a social act, it can be a very divine kind of act. And we're going to look at that next time. All right. Thank you all for the evening. We're off for next week, but this, if you haven't heard, okay, let's count.